no place for doubt. Every decision he made had to be absolute, every adjustment had to be flawless. He had to be a master of the mundane, a curator of the discarded, and a savior of the significant. He was, in every sense, the most important person in the world, even if the world would never know his name. The nights were often the hardest, when the quiet of the city pressed in on him and the voice seemed to grow more insistent. He would spend those hours poring over manuals and notes, trying to decipher the complex geometry of the universe as it was presented to him. He found peace in the logic of the system, even when that logic seemed to defy the laws of physics. He understood that the world was not just a collection of matter, but a living, breathing entity that required constant nurturing. He was the nurturer, the silent gardener of reality, tending to the roots of existence so that the flowers of humanity could continue to bloom. He often wondered what his patients thought of his frequent absences, whether they noticed the change in him, the way he seemed to look through them to something much further away. He cared for them still, but his care was now informed by a broader perspective, a deeper understanding of the fragility of the human condition. He tried to teach them that the small things in life mattered, that a paper clip or a shoe could be the source of immense significance if they were looked at in the right way. They rarely understood, but he didn't mind. He knew that the truth was not something that could be taught, but something that had to be discovered in the quiet moments of life. The doctor had finally found his calling, a path that led him far from the conventional expectations of his profession. He was content to be a mystery, a whisper in the wind, a shadow that ensured the sun would rise another day. He knew that the world was full of wonders, but he also knew that it was full of dangers that could only be averted by those who were willing to look beyond the surface of things. He was the silent hero of the world, the guardian of the balance, the man who made sure that the world kept spinning in the right direction, one small, insignificant piece of junk at a time. He knew that his journey would never be finished, and he embraced that. For as long as there was a need for him, he had a reason to go on. His life was a tapestry of small deeds and grand outcomes, a work of art that was never completed but always in progress. He found beauty in the discarded, significance in the small, and purpose in the seemingly meaningless. He was a man who had been given a chance to save the world, and he would never trade that for anything else. The world was a funny place, as Edgar had said, but it was a place worth saving, and the doctor was the one to do it. He would keep his work, he would stay vigilant, and he would ensure that no matter what happened, the world would never go poof. As he reached for a new object, a set of keys he had found on the street, he felt the familiar surge of energy. He knew that this was what was needed, the final piece of the puzzle that would keep the balance for the next month. He carefully placed them on the table, feeling the shift in the air, the subtle change in the world's equilibrium. It was done. He allowed himself a moment of rest, a moment to look out the window at the city that remained safe because of his work. He was a doctor, a scientist, and a guardian, and he was, above all, content. The city remained the same, unaware of the efforts of the man in the apartment. But the doctor knew, and that was enough. He lived for the moments of quiet accomplishment, the times when the world was perfectly balanced and he could finally breathe. He was the silent partner of the universe, the invisible hand that guided the world through the uncertainties of its existence. He was at peace, for he had finally understood what it meant to be a part of the world and to be the guardian of it. At the same time, he was, in his own way, a part of the symphony of life, playing his part in a performance that would never end. He often thought about the future, wondering if the world would continue to need guardians, or if one day it would reach a state where such interventions were no longer necessary. He hoped for that day, but he knew that it was a long way off. In the meantime, he would continue his work, he would stay in the apartment, and he would keep his secrets. He was the witness to the world's persistence, the collector of its discarded dreams, and the architect of its ongoing reality. He was happy to be so. He was the man who had answered the call, the man who had taken the burden, and the man who had found his true purpose in the heart of the world. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and the doctor remained a constant, steady presence. He had become a master of his craft, a sage of the small, a genius of the ordinary. He found that the more he worked, the more he understood, and the more he understood, the more he loved the world. He was a man who had seen the worst of humanity and yet still believed in its potential. A man who had seen the destruction of an island and yet still held onto the hope of a brighter future. He was a man of paradoxes, a man of mystery, and a man of immense quiet strength. He had learned that the voice was not a master to be obeyed but a partner to be consulted. He had learned that the balance was not a prison but a freedom. He had learned that he was not an outcast, but a participant in a grand, unseen design. He had found his home in the apartment with the disconnected bell, and he had found his family in the community of objects that surrounded him. He was no longer looking for answers, for he had realized that the work itself was the answer. He was the answer. The world outside continued to spin, oblivious to the man in the apartment who kept it steady. But every once in a while, a person might look up at the sky and feel a sense of peace that they could not explain, or see a sunset and feel a connection to something greater than themselves. They did not know why they felt that way, and they did not know that a man was working at a table nearby, carefully placing a paper clip just so to ensure that the beauty of the world remained, even for a moment longer. They were the beneficiaries of his silence, the inheritors of his devotion, and the silent recipients of his care. The doctor was finally at rest, for the work was never done, but it was always being done. He had found a balance within himself that matched the balance he brought to the world. He was a man of peace, a man of purpose, and a man who had finally understood the true meaning of his existence. He was the guardian, the watcher, and the keeper of the flame. And as long as he was there, the world would always be safe. For he was the one who kept the world from going poof. He was the doctor of the planet, and he was proud of his work. The story of the doctor and the apartment would remain a secret, a legend told in whispers by those who might have noticed the strange old man who collected trash. But to the doctor it was not a story, but a reality, a lived experience that defined his every moment. He had found his place, he had done his duty, and he had found his peace. He was the man who had answered the call of the unknown, and he had risen to the challenge with all the grace and dedication he possessed. He was, in the end, exactly what the world needed, a man who cared, a man who acted, and a man who understood that even the smallest things could make the greatest difference. He looked out the window one last time as the sun set over the city, the light catching the various objects on his desk, making them glow with a soft, warm radiance. He felt a sense of contentment that he had never felt before, a deep, abiding joy that was tied to the very essence of life. He knew that the world was safe for now, and that, he decided, was enough. He was the doctor and he was the guardian, and he was, at last, where he was always meant to be. The night began to fall, but the world continued, turning in the darkness, kept safe by the silent, steady work of the man in the apartment. As the years passed, the doctor became a figure of local mystery, a man seen occasionally in the neighborhood, still carrying his bag, still looking for the odd item that no one else wanted. People would whisper about him, wondering what he